So I was listening to Josh Johnson's set on the ice killings in Minneapolis, and what he said reminded me of this essay by Thoreau. He said that everyone is arguing the legality of this, but no one is looking at the morality of it, something like that. The core idea being that if your government is doing something that is legal but unjust in the moral sense, should you not be allowed to protest or withdraw your support of that government, which you so freely do through your taxes every year? And this is an important question for America today, where you see the government waging wars or kidnapping presidents. I obviously did not consent to any of those actions, but my tax dollars are going to that cause, or with ICE and border control DHS. So anyway, the point being that the conscience of an individual should have a higher value than the letter of the constitution or law. That is one of the core ideas of this essay, of course. And we can see this panning out uh, through revolutions in the form of Mahatma Gandhi in India and Martin Luther King as well. Very famously, this essay has inspired at least these two, also countless others, I'm sure. So that's another motivation for me to read this now. Another thing that the essay essentially starts with is the idea of no government at all being the ideal state for the government, although I don't know how this has progressed through the years. Every time I hear the term free markets, something boils in my blood because it just promotes more skewed wealth distribution. So I'm sure some governance is essential because this essay assumes that every individual will act according to his moral conscience. But if the moral conscience of a Trump or an Elon is skewed, or they have no moral compass, let's say, and they are ruthlessly chasing profits alone, not looking at the consequences of their actions, then Thoreau didn't account for that for sure, because if there were no government, even the modicum of or some sensibility of governance that we have today won't be present at all. So that's another quick point I just wanted to make here. Okay, taking a broad view again, what do you do then in such a situation? What does Thoreau tell us to do through this essay? He is telling us to accept the consequences of not obeying the law. Basically, go to prison and be happy in prison, as he himself did, is essentially what Thoreau is saying. He also recounts his life in prison towards the second half of this essay, and he makes the case that when he was in prison, he didn't feel like a prisoner because he was right in his head. Whatever he did was morally justifiable, and that made him free. But the agents of the state, as he calls them, the police and the tax gatherers, as he calls them, they are acting according to the law, but maybe even they know that they are doing something wrong because they don't get any happiness even after they put him into prison. They are the ones who are in real prison of the state, whereas Thoreau, even in his prison, is able to see through the wooden gates and the iron locks. The people outside those could not get to him because he was right in his mind. So again, very interesting phrasing and idea as well. There are a few more points that I wanted to touch on, so I'll go rapid fire here. He claims that when you enlist in the army, the state has quote unquote made you into a machine because you don't think about the consequences or the morality of your actions. You just go by what your commander tells you. So basically, the state has made a machine out of you. And even though you may know that what you're doing is wrong, you are so inbred into the system that you have stopped questioning your actions at all. And everywhere you go, people are praising you for your service. Thank you for your service. And you internalize that somehow and you stop thinking for yourself and you become a puppet for the state. So very interesting again. Another thing he says is that compliance, silence basically. So if you don't protest when the government does something wrong, means that you support them in their actions. You might wait it out and see, or you claim that, oh, you don't know anything about that, so let's turn a blind eye to that until the issue dies down. But Thoreau claims, and rightfully so, that all of these actions cannot be excused, because how do you not see the effects your tax dollars are having on the people around you? That's another big thing with Thoreau. Act as a neighbor, a good neighbor would do. So, okay. Also, he, towards the end, talks of an ideal form of government. So we went from monarchy to limited monarchy to democracy, but he again asks if there is a better state possible. And it is possible, of course. We can always polish things around. But his claim that keeping the individual as the central core of any government would be the end state of this. So here's a quote that illustrates this point. Quote, there will never be a really free and enlightened state until the state comes to recognize the individual as a higher and independent power, from which all its own power and authority are derived, and treats him accordingly. End quote. And then he goes on to say that he hasn't seen such a state yet, and probably we never will, but that is the end goal we should all be aiming for, which isn't happening today as well. So again, very interesting that we should all have in our mind what we are working towards, and that is more individuality and acting according to our own morality. Okay, one more thing that I wanted to mention here is that today's state imposes its rules on its citizens, and that is the direct contrast of how it should be. The citizen, again, the V for Vendetta quote, that a people should not be afraid of the government should be afraid of its people. So interesting again. There's another quote that again goes back to not giving your tax dollars for nefarious actions of the government. Here, quote, if 1,000 men were not to pay their tax bills this year, that would not be a violent and bloody measure, as it would be to pay them and enable the state to commit violence and shed innocent blood. This is in fact the definition of a peaceable revolution, if any such is possible. If the tax gatherer or any other public officer asks me, as one has done, quote, but what shall I do? My answer is, if you really wish to do anything, resign your office. When the subject has refused allegiance and the officer has resigned his office, then the revolution is accomplished. But even suppose blood should flow, is there not a sort of bloodshed when the conscience is wounded? Though this wound a man's real manhood and immortality flow out, and he bleeds to an everlasting death, I see this blood flowing now. End quote. So very interesting how he claims that if you are not courageous enough to stand up to the state, even raise your voices, that's the least you can do, right? Fine, you got to pay taxes and you don't want to spend your night in prison, but you can at least be aware and raise voices against the actions that you don't agree from the government. You aren't doing that at all, are you? And is that not wounding your conscience? And you can see the effects of your inaction, right, in the thousands of people dying in Iran. Would it not then be prudent to stand up to your government now to prevent future deaths? Does that not haunt you at all? Again, very interesting that all of us should be thinking of right now. And these are the points that will stay with me. Also, he mentioned Orpheus. That was quite the surprise for me because I recently just read the Sonnets to Orpheus by Rilke. So fancy seeing him here, but good fun. So yeah, it's a short essay that you all should read. Go read. Thanks for listening.